Hello, Robs. We're back with more book reading. Lovely, eh? We'll lead off where we left off. As you might. As you recall, it was said that Jeffers wrote a poem for Una each day early on in their marriage. This one was from 1915, written in Pasadena at the Jeffers folks' home. To you, Jay. Ujay? To you, Jay. Come with me into the vineyard, O sister, O my bride. While tenderest light is being drawn as with well buckets from the morning side, to make the sky a lake filled full of day. For liquid is the light and tenderest gray this rainy dawn. Come, we will walk in our vineyard. There is no rain. What did I say of rain? Except it rained all night, feeding the flowers. And if you were awake, you must have heard that lesbian-throated mockingbird. Lesbian-throated? Hello, bro. Or is it a lipstick lesbian? Molding such music between showers as only lovers ought to listen to. And I was right to listen, and would fain have wakened you, love, to listen. When the rainfall stopped, how chokingly, how passionately abrupt. What bursts of gold that song, a golden chain. Let me turn off this heater. I will not turn off that heater, though. How chokingly, how passionately abrupt. What bursts of gold that song, a golden chain, notes linked by love's fulfillment, our love too complete. And in the night rejoiced the whole flaming soul of spring, perfectly voiced. Come walk with me in the vineyard. The odors are all so sweet. The leaves are long already and broad, the grapes in clusters hung are still so young, like little green grains of wheat, yet they are full of a God, and he so young, hung wide over our vineyard, O sister, O my bride. Is not this tenderest gray sky of light just colored like the underside of one of the leaves of the long vine? And on the skyward face of every leaf the gemmed and clustered raindrops shine, tenderly bright, pearls, would you say? Ah, brief and delicate delight. Catch it, for it is brief, and never another morning of any year will be like this one. O most dear, never such tenderness and beauty allied, never such fragrance, never a gray so gay. O my heart's twin sister, sister and bride, not till the years of time and are fled away, not till our loves are dead and deified. We have met three gods in our vineyard up at the hill's brow. Icus is one. I don't know how to say that. Love is one, and love is one. There is a greater still here on the brow of the hill, and when, under what sun in the world, or how, in what extreme day, golden or gray, have ever another poet and his bride gone hand in hand, side by side, talking of wonderful gifts and signs, walking with gods between vines. Oh, full of gods is the vineyard, and I am silent now. Spring 1915, Pasadena. I felt so immature and such a great distance behind these wonderful new friends. It used to seem to me as though they had read and heard and done everything. There was an incredible amount of ground to be covered if I ever hoped to catch up with them. I tried to give them an idea of my childhood, of those vivid, lawless days which had helped to make history in California. Wait, she made history? I've forgotten this book even though I've read it twice. I came from the Kern County town. At the back of this book is another unpublished poem of this same period. I came from the Kern County town when it was still Wild West. The hills were filled with desperados, those same mountain passes of ledge caves and scrub oaks in clustered entanglements that Stevenson said murderers might hide in. I can remember vividly the Sunday night that Kinney, the bandit, rode into Bakersfield and killed the sheriff and his two deputies, including Bert Tibbett, father of the now famous Lawrence Tibbett, the singer. It was an excessively hot Sunday afternoon. I was all dressed up in my best dress, walking toward the village for my great weekly treat, an ice cream soda. My father's secretary rushed out, grabbed hold of me, and turned me back in the direction of our house. She screamed at me to go home. There was shooting going on at that very moment. I could hear it, and I was suddenly terrified, as was everyone else. The women had pulled all the curtains down at their windows. Only the braver ones dared to peek out. The dumber ones. For hours, everyone stayed at home, barricading themselves in with anything they could put their hands on. Mother pulled me in the front door so quickly my feet didn't even touch the floor. She was panic-stricken. Why didn't they just leave town? But they finally cornered Kinney down in the red light district, which was about the largest part of Bakersfield in those days. Kinney was hiding down there, but someone recognized him and they shot it out to the finish. They carried his body into the drugstore where we got our ice cream sodas. It was one of those funny old-fashioned drugstores with the big green and red globes of water in the windows. Souvenir hunters snitched bits of Kinney's clothing while he lay there in a sort of unholy state. He was there for display purposes, not for internment. In 1950, Hazel Pinkham got me interested in going to the Denishon group School of Dancing. A superficial group of society women frequented the classes, hoping to make their figures beautiful. I must confess I started out with the same idea. After the first lesson, dancing became an obsession with me. Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Dennis became interested in my work. I took private lessons from Ruth. She used to create during these private lessons special interpretive studies which I have never forgotten. As she would create the movements, I would follow step by step. I soon lost myself completely under her hypnotic force. One day after I had finished a terrifically difficult dance, Ruth called over Brother St. Dennis, her stage manager. She made me dance again for him. Afterwards, she said, "Remember, brother, I found this girl and she's going to make a great artist. She is my nut brown maid." Those days of intensive hard work and practicing and study were memorable ones. Ruth St. Dennis was incomparable. Her teachings, given from her very soul, inspired many of my young friends who were pioneers in the Denishon School. Martha Graham and the lovely little Mary Hay, Ada Foreman, Betty Horst, Ruth Austin, Doris Humphrey, Margaret Loomis, Florence Andrews. Curiously enough, Una did not share my enthusiasm for interpretive dancing. I think now, as I look back, her lack of interest was entirely due to the fact that she was only interested in making a new home for Robin. And she wanted children. Nothing else mattered. To her, a career for a woman was a meaningless thing. I am convinced that had Una encouraged me during that particular phase of my life, I undoubtedly would have made every sacrifice necessary to become a great dancer. Subconsciously, I was very aware of the completeness in Una's life which I lacked. Sadly enough, my marriage with Edward was not the solution. From the very beginning, in those early days of Una's marriage to Robin, we couldn't help but feel alone and insignificant in contrast to their all-absorbing passion for each other. There has never been a love like theirs. Yes, there has. Edith, come on now. There's been many. And not all of them were situations where he cheated multiple times. I love Jeffers, but he was a prick. I mean, in the end, he basically had his wife shoot himself because he cheated on her. So let's not romanticize this. If Una suspected that our marriage was doomed to be a failure, never by a word or sign did she intimate such a possibility. She did divorce the guy that you married, so. On the contrary, she gave me invaluable advice founded in an understanding of Edward, which I never achieved. She didn't either, baby girl. During the months they waited for the birth of their first child, Una and Robin lived in La Jolla, or is it La Jolla, in a little house called Breezy Nest. It was perched high upon a hill above the sea. We used to visit them there and had great fun walking over the rocks and cliffs. La Jolla, in those days, had not been invaded. I hope they don't bring up La Jolla again, because I think I'm saying it wrong. Had not been invaded by realtors. It was an untouched little village. We had some jolly, silly jaunts together. One was to the San Diego Fair in 1915. I remember Robin attempted to ride a fast revolving plate, but he was projected off into space with the rest of us. Try to be dignified and slow there, my lad, Una jibed at him. We stopped to eat our supper on the seashore by Laguna, a lovely remote spot in those days. Darkness fell, and I planted 4 candles in the sand for light, 4 bits of flame that remained steadfast against the night when we looked back as we drove slowly along the cliffs. This is one of the little glowing memories put carefully away in my mind, and in theirs too, for Robin made a little poem about it. One night at San Gabriel, I saw a frightened Una, my once, her, brindle bulldog. My once her, brindle bulldog. I don't understand the once her. Beau Brummel was famous for the lightning speed of his movements. The cook had discovered a family of mice living in a disused flour bin, and we watched the hunt. In dived Beau, swallowed several, and emerged with flour all over his crazy, wrinkled face. He dashed toward Una, one mouse still clutched in his teeth. Una leaped into a chair and shrieked. It was very comical, flour everywhere, and Beau, feverishly determined to win her applause. Robin and all of us, except Una, shouted with laughter. Perhaps it is only mice she fears, for since then I've seen her accept some very curious pets. Besides the lovebirds and ringdoves and bantams, there have been a fierce hawk with broken wing, a baby bat named Noctule. That I did not remember. A baby bat named Noctule, and fed with an eyedropper, 2 repulsive snakes that Lady Hastings gave the boys. Una did rebel at the guinea pigs with their possibilities. Robin was a magnificent swimmer and used to go in the sea every day. Una, Billy, their English bull, stood watch on the cliff. Meanwhile, Robin, completely oblivious of time, well, he did have no job, and he had a inheritance, and, I mean, did he really have anything to do? Meanwhile, Robin, completely oblivious of time or distance, would swim out so far Una couldn't even see his head. Then she would go mad with fear. When Robin reappeared, she scolded and wept and laughed through her tears of relief. She was always terrified, yet fascinated by his prowess, battling through those winter waves. Never were 2 lives any happier. The days flew past, one more joyous than the last. Una sewed. She made exquisite little garments for her baby, whom she always called Donnan. When the time came for her confinement, Robin brought Una back to Los Angeles so that her friend, the famous obstetrician, Dr. Titian Coffey, could deliver the child. A beautiful little girl was born, whom Una immediately named Maeve, out of an Irish legend. 2 days later, the child died. The shock almost killed Una. She was inconsolable. Delirious for days, she kept repeating over and over again so piteously, I want my baby, I want my baby. I didn't see the baby afterwards. I was too shattered. But Hazel Pinkham said they used the net and lace carriage cover which I had made for an ephemeral little shroud. It was a heartbreaking tragedy to survive. But Una was very brave. She said to me with rare tears pouring down her face, I will not look back. One has to learn to close doors. It was after this that Una and Robin came to Carmel to live. Frederick Mortimer Clapp, one of Una's dearest friends in the world, knew and loved Carmel. He had described many times its unforgettable beauty. So they came north to explore, to find out for themselves if they should make their home there. They fell in love with it from the moment they came over the hill from Monterey. They searched for a house and found a log cabin built on the edge of a canyon, close to the sand dunes and the sea. Una wrote me ecstatic letters and invited me up for a visit. Of course I accepted. I couldn't get there fast enough. Una and Robin met me at the train in Monterey. I peered eagerly out of the window and saw that beautiful bay filled with little blue Spanish and Italian fishing boats. Fish nets were draped haphazardly over the fields. They seemed even to cover the family little Chinese laundries near the funny little Chinese laundries near the waterfront. Robin picked up my bags and put them underneath the seat of the surrey Una was driving. We got in and started gaily away in the direction of Carmel. I marveled at Una. She handled those two spirited horses so expertly. I've always been terrified of horses, of being on their backs or behind their tails. As we rode along, my terror grew by leaps and bounds. Una was so unconcerned. She chattered away, pointing out fascinating old adobe houses. She gave new luster to everything she spoke about. I felt as though I were riding in a juggernaut, riding head-on into inevitable annihilation. There was one little streetcar track in Monterey. My fear was great that Una would get the wheels of our buggy caught in that track. I no sooner thought of this than it happened. Undisturbed, Una sat up straighter than ever, completely disregarding the fact that she had done anything awkward. She refused to admit by the turn of a hair that a mild catastrophe had occurred. Miraculously, or so it seemed to me, she extricated us. The wrenched wheel revolved like a disgruntled egg beater, making a hideous sound. Of course, people turned and laughed at our ridiculous progress up the street. Robin sat beside Una, not saying a word. He didn't mention the accident, and I didn't dare to. As we drove up the steep grade toward Carmel, Una stopped to let the horses rest and to point out to me the Monterey Bay behind us, a perfect blue crescent, one of the most beautiful bays in the world. To the east of it, behind a black line of pine trees, is Del Monte. A few minutes later, we steered down Ocean Avenue, the steep dirt road in the Carmel. In those days, there were only a few stores on the main street. No one seemed to be greatly concerned with business. Many times we've gone to a store only to find it closed and a sign in the door, "Back in 2 hours, pop." Slevin ran the stationery store, combined with a makeshift post office. It was the meeting place extraordinary. When we reached Carmel, we got out and left the horses at Hodges, then Gould's livery stable. We walked the rest of the way down a joyous little path to the log cabin. It was very early, one of those exciting spring mornings when the entire world seemed to be turning cartwheels over the hills. Down to the sea, all of Carmel was lost beneath a cloud of wild lilac, and the air filled with its fragrance. The road to the cabin dwindled away to nothing. We were remote from humankind, but no, Una said. There are people nearby, hidden in the forest. Listen what happened yesterday. Robin was chopping wood by the back door and motioned me to come out. A voice was ringing through the trees, a woman's voice, loud and threatening. "Blood, savagery, rampant, shoot them down." We were astounded and delighted by this outburst. Then we discovered in the village 'twas Mary Austin practicing the speech she means to deliver in an anti-war meeting in Golden Gate Park. Her cottage is across the gulch. That log cabin era is one of my most beautiful memories. The cabin was not large, a living room with an enormous fireplace, one bedroom and bath, and an excessively small kitchen. Una cooked all the meals on an old iron stove. She did it so gaily, but it made me uneasy to see her struggling with the fire and lifting the heavy iron lids. When I went back to Los Angeles, I sent her up a two-burner oil stove, which she simplified things. I can't read. Which she said simplified things remarkably. By the fireplace was one of those big brown baskets used by Chinamen to carry fish, kelp, and vegetables. Una had found it on the shore. It was always filled with driftwood, choice bits kept for their grotesque shapes, twisted bone-white likeness of beasts and birds, or frayed oak planks showing certain dark stains, where copper and brass nails had once held fixtures of metal. These pieces were certain to burn with brilliant flaming greens, blues, and orange when Una carefully laid them upon the coals, murmuring, "Is all our fire of shipwrecked wood, oak, and pine? Well, as James Lee's wife says, hell beneath." Browning was another of her favorites then. Above the fireplace was a wide shelf, and upon it a small stone cross she had brought back from Cornwall. A jug of wild flowers, fragrant yellow clover, melilot, she liked to call it. Melilot, she liked to call it, and irises if Una could get them, particularly the very pale ones which grew only in one patch on the slope where the gate now opens to Palo Corono Ranch. There was also a small mirror set into a wooden frame, crudely carved but worn very smooth, with the wooden covers swinging on a wooden hinge over its face. They had found this hanging to a tree nearby and supposed it must belong to the log cabin, so left it there when they departed. Afterwards, the woman who owned the house thanked Una for this wonderful relic, a museum piece from the old Spanish days. They never found out its history. Oh, how Una wished she'd kept it. One night, we sat by the fire listening to the high wind, which sounded like sea waves through the trees, close against the house. Robin begged Una to read Synge's Riders to the Sea. Her low voice, rising and falling, brought into the room the beat of the sea and the relentless surge of grief. Tears streamed from her eyes with Moria's final words about her drowned sons. Bartley will have a fine coffin out of the white boards and a deep grave, surely. No man at all can be living forever, and we must be satisfied. While we sat there still shaken, there came a broken tapping. Oh, Robin, it is a white bird the wind has dashed against the pane. Her pale face was whiter still. Robin opened the window, reached out a great hand, and gently enclosed the little creature. It isn't white at all. It's someone's little lost canary, and she carried it to the kitchen to spend the night perched on the towel line. What if it had been white? I wondered. Then Una, still under the Gaelic spell, was telling us an old tale of white birds coming out of the night as omens of death. Years after, she read me this refrain rescued from an unpublished poem of Robin's. Fleet birds go flying through the wind over the sea, birds of the dying on wings unheard. Foremost that old man's bird, beautiful among three. A white bird and two red, gray rain over the sea. Souls of three dead people, dear souls to me, go flying, go vanishing, flying. Una told us she once had another curious experience of a bird coming out of the night. It was when she and Edward Custer were living in Los Angeles. He called to her from the garden back of the house. It was late twilight. There in the path stood a wild duck. How came it there, alone and alien in the midst of a crowded city? Una had been much under the spell of Ibsen's Wild Duck, and sensed in this some mysterious symbol or omen. They watched the creature until it rose silently, and without circling, winged a direct course away north. On what far flight? As soon as we finished breakfast in the morning, we went for a walk down the canyon, then on a trail which wound through the forest. There were wildflowers running helter-skelter every place, so many unfamiliar ones I had never seen before. But Una knew all their names. She pointed out triumphantly the fairy lanterns and the sticky monkey plant and the lovely Indian paintbrush. Once she dashed away from the path and called out over her shoulder, "Robin, here is a perfectly precious little wild rose." Finding a wild rose was exciting, especially the year's first one. Suddenly, at the end of a trail, we came out upon the white, strange sand dunes close to the sea. Una always ended her walks along this eerie white stretch of sand. Robin called her Little Seaward. After my first visit, Una wrote me, "Robin now calls you Little Seaward the second." Sometimes sunset would find us by the water meadow near the river mouth. Clouds of gulls rose up and circled away to the north of their secret resting place. We would lean against the old rail fence and watch the rose light fade from the pools and creeping shadows blot out the farther hills. There's Una in Italy. Out the farther hills, then look nearer, then out the farther hills, then the nearer ones, then the trees and the farmhouse. Look, Una said, that's exactly what Meredith saw. Darker grows the valley, more and more forgetting. Those daily expeditions were always eventful, for Una didn't just walk. She was so aware, so conscious of all the beauty around us. She taught me to see and how to use my eyes. Occasionally, Robin and Billy would dash away to some distant knoll, and with a furious abandon would go leaping down to the edge of the sea. This never failed to delight Una. She loved watching great tall Robin racing down the steep and sand dunes, and Billy off and away to scare up flocks of seagulls from the sand. She called him Old General Twinklefoot. He was lame in one front foot and had such a funny gait when he ran. When we went for longer walks in the hills, I was amazed to discover Una's familiarity with every inch of that wild country. She not only knew the names of all the wildflowers, but the names of all the birds and the trees. She reveled in the mysterious brooding beauty of the Santa Lucia Mountains. In those early days, the Big Sur district down the coast was practically inaccessible. The first time Robin and Una had gone down, they drove the dangerous sea road with horses and wagon. It was during one of these early trips that they came upon the ranch house built of squared redwood logs, which Robin used later for a scene in one of his first great poems. Una has a great gift. She can be alone with a stranger for 2 seconds or 5 minutes and come away with a fragment of some incredible story. It was Una who talked with an old resident of the Big Sur. He told her the last owner of the abandoned ranch house had been killed by his stallion, and out of this Robin conceived her own stallion. From the very beginning, Una gathered up the airy tales around and about the strange Santa Lucia Mountains, from the secret caves and landing places along the shore, from farmers, from fishermen, from all kinds of people. Una has such a glorious way of coming back home and telling some small incident, dramatizing, building an entire legend out of it. Robin and Una were intensely interested in the stars. They were studying star charts, and every night we watched the constellations wheel across the sky. There was talk of evening and morning stars and the colors of Sirius and Red Antares. They pointed out the line of the zodiac with sighs of grief from Una that it was hopeless for them to try to tell the hour of the night by a glance at the sky, as Gabriel Oak did. Una would smile a bit shyly after these talks and say, "Of course, Robin's brother Hamilton is a real astronomer. He is very embarrassed about what color Aldebaran seems to me. He talks in terms of meridian circles and orbits of comets." Point Lobos is one of Una's favorite haunts. With the fog swirling around it, it made me think of the scene from Tristan and Isolde when Tristan is dying. You can hear the shepherd's pipes playing off somewhere among the trees. When we used to drive out for a picnic on Point Lobos, the horses would invariably rear and plunge, refusing to go under the gnarled old cypress trees. There is something so sinister and frightening about the place. One hears that years ago, Indians used to have human sacrifices on Lobos. Lobos is the scene of Robin's Tamar. I liked to swim in the sea at the mouth of the Carmel River. Una and Robin would stand by and watch me. Robin never swims in Carmel Bay. He says the water there comes straight from the Arctic Ocean. When Robin took the twins in one day, a sudden mask of fear came over Una's face. She told me afterwards in her horoscope there is a notation of danger by water. But somehow she must have conquered this fear later or defied it. For after Robin taught the boys to swim in the river mouth, they went into the rough sea every day. People would gather along the road to see the waves throw them among and over the jutting rocks below, and they as indifferent as seals. And Robin tells me that long ago Una went down to the little cove every day for over a year in sun and rain and wind for a morning dip, but at that time I alone went in. When I played around in the surf, I felt like a dancer in the great robe of the elements, with the wind and the waves and the tide. Robin said, "Edith, you skim the water like some beautiful seabird. I shall never go to the shore again without seeing a bacchant, I can't say it, bacchant, along the edge of the foam." I recalled those moments with great joy when I reread Robin's lyric Fauna. Una said I had helped Robin to the vision of fauna, dancing ankle deep in the lapping waves. Every day was such a perfect blending of the practical things that had to be done and the things that were beautiful. There was no outside social life in those early Carmel days. We always went down to the beach and hoisted driftwood onto our shoulders to carry home for the fires. Una invariably stopped right in the midst of cooking. to tell Robin and me some fascinating thing, or she would look out of the window, then enraptured by the flash of a blue jay's wing, or the beauty of the pine trees, she would bring that beauty into the room and give it to us, rare gifts, given so lavishly, so exquisitely. The food Una prepared was always substantial. For breakfast, huge bowls of well-cooked oatmeal with rich yellow cream, delicious coffee. Luncheon was simple, thick slices of wonderful warm bread, cheese and milk, and wildflower honey we had fetched from the honeyman. Dinner was the important meal of the day. If we had meat or fish, it meant a trip to Monterey. All was served on the bare boards. The table was a cross-section of the trunk of a great sugar pine, the surface slanted but was scrubbed smooth and snow-white. In contrast to my instinctive extravagances, Una's frugality never ceased to intrigue me. She would get so cross if anything went to waste. To her, wastefulness was a sin, too stupid to be endured. She made an art of economy. And that will be all for today, bravs. Goodbye.